Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota has a new book out tomorrow. It's called No Going Back, and while it's filled with lessons from her time as governor, as a congresswoman, it also includes stories that are now drawing criticism. Governor Noem says her main point is to explain how the country's not going back to the Republican Party of the 2000s.
And the governor is joining us live to talk about the book this morning. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Just based off the book itself, can you tell us, what is the Republican Party to you right now? Is it the party of the former president, Donald Trump? And have you had any conversations with him about being a potential running mate?
Oh, goodness sakes. Well, there's a lot in that question. I would say the Republican Party of today is filled with people that love America. They respect our Constitution. They embrace freedom and liberty. The book that I've written, No Going Back, talks about the fact that when Donald Trump entered the scenes of politics, that he really broke politics, that he had a totally different method of talking to people, of campaigning. And as I visit with folks, I want them to realize that we're not going to be able to go back to politics before Donald Trump, that he broke it in a good way, that it allows now elected officials to have honest conversations with the American people, that we have the ability now to be real people, have flaws, not be perfect, but to have conversations on who we are and not pretend to be something else. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity for America to have a real conversation on the fact that leadership has consequences. So this book is really a how-to guide for the average citizen to get involved and to make sure that they're helping to elect the right leaders that really do care about this country. And it's a citizen's guidebook on what they can do to really put leaders in positions, recognizing that leadership does have consequences.
So have you had a conversation with him about being a potential running mate?
Oh, we've talked a lot. We talk quite a bit. I think that what I've told the president clearly is that he needs to pick the best person to run with him that will help him win. Because every day that Joe Biden's in the White House, I'm on defense. I feel like I'm constantly in a situation where I'm being stopped from protecting my people. I'm getting overrun with regulations. Costs are going up. Electricity and gas prices have gone up. Grocery prices have gone up. When Donald Trump was in the White House, I got to be on offense. He helped me solve problems. He helped me make life easier for the families in South Dakota. So I'm going to do whatever I can to help him win. And I told him that his running mate should be somebody that can help him get back into the White House, too.
Well, there has been a lot of conversation now about some of the excerpts in this book, and that you may not be a potential running mate because of it. I do want to talk about this weekend. A Colorado Republican fundraiser had to be canceled due to some safety concerns. The event space claimed it was receiving even death threats over the excerpt in your book about killing your dog. With the backlash, it does seem that you're doubling down, though, on this, now saying President Biden's dog, Commander, should suffer the same fate. Can you help us here?
Oh, I've already talked about those stories, and I think people should buy the book and really read it for themselves. You know, there's a lot of conversations in this book that goes back over my lifetime, and this book is filled with vulnerable stories, tough decisions that I've had to make in the past, my time in Congress. It goes into my time as governor, you know, and I think that people will really learn a lot about me, but they'll also learn a lot about their government. They'll find out a lot that money does make a difference in politics, that the corruption is there, and that a lot of times these campaign consultants aren't there for the benefit of the American people or their candidates. They're there to make themselves rich. This book was filled with a lot of stories that are unfiltered because I want people to understand the truth. And I'm one of those people that's very real. I've never claimed to be perfect. But what I do say is that I definitely don't hide from the truth, and I don't run away from tough decisions. And I hope that's what people who read this book really understand about me.
In a recent CBS interview, you said the, quote, fake news media has a different set of rules for conservatives. So why continue on this publicity tour with the mainstream media if you don't feel you've been given a fair shake?
I'm always willing to talk to the American people, and that's what I'm hoping that we get the chance to do. You know, there have been interviews where I've been interrupted and treated rudely, but I don't treat people that way. And I think that that's part of what's addressed in this book is that we need to bring civil discourse back into our society. We need to sit down at a table and have a diversity of opinions. I have a whole chapter on the fact that I believe when you have people from different backgrounds and different cultures, different experiences at a table discussing the important issues of the day, you'll get better policy. You'll have better laws in this country, and we'll understand each other more. So, you know, that's really the lesson that we need to learn that we haven't embraced in this country lately. We live in a country that loves to be offended by each other. We get people all the time who say one thing and oh, they're so offended and it ends up in conflict. And we got to get over ourselves and start talking to each other again and listening.
Can you clear something up for us? How did the meeting with Kim Jongun end up in the book?
You know, we've talked about this already in other interviews. I'm going to move on and talk about the rest of this book, which is so powerful. It talks incredibly about those of us in elected office making sure that we're cooperating together to get the best decisions. And it also talks about the fact that when you travel the world, it talks about my experience serving in different roles and being involved in policy for over 30 years, traveling the world, meeting with many world leaders. That's all experience that we can learn lessons from. And I'm happy that I can, at least in this book, give people that information to know that they have someone in place that's not only run businesses, that has also served in public office and has a background that can give some insight into how politics really works and why the most powerful person that's involved in government and politics is them, is the average citizen. It's you. You showing up. This world still moves by people who show up, and they're the ones who change policy.
All right. Governor, thanks so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. You bet. Have a wonderful day.
You too.